Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. Before we jump into the usual shenanigans, I just want to say to Dana, who is usually in the live chat but is not with us tonight because she is performing in A Little Princess. Once again, for those of you who have been following our live streams together, you know that Dana is playing Miss Minchin in a community theater production of A Little Princess. And so tonight and tomorrow are her last two shows. So break a leg, Dana. I know I told you that already privately, but publicly, break a leg. And uh, yeah. That's all I wanted to say about that. But so I believe the curtain goes up at 7:30. So I don't know if she may text me or message me during the show because she was going to try and find out when the live stream of the show is going to be because the plan is for them to live stream tomorrow's show, which will be the final performance. But so far, there's been no specific information about that. Like there's not a link or anything as far as that I can point you to. But I know some of you have expressed interest in wanting to watch Dana's play. So as soon as I know anything about where to watch it, I will pass it on to you. And if it happens during this live stream, I will pass it on to you and put the link in the description and make it as easy as I possibly can for everybody who wants to watch Dana's play to find it. But now that that's out of the way, um, as usual, I will be starting with questions I have received from my Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you are in the live chat with us right now and you have a question you want to ask me, or you're planning on being generous um, with, sending me a super chat or something like that, um, I would ask that you wait until I get through the patron questions and then I can devote my full attention to the live chat. Um, because and for some I know for some reason the last couple of streams I'm not sure exactly why, if it's a YouTube glitch or something, but usually when someone does post a live chat and I miss it the first time, I can go back in my my studio panel and my control center for the live stream and see all the ones that people have posted. But for the last couple of times, the earlier ones have been missing. Like I haven't gotten I only see the ones that I can scroll back far enough through the chat to see. So please, if you are going to send a live chat, you want me to respond to it, or send a super chat and you want me to respond to it, please wait until I'm paying full attention to the live chat. Um, Otherwise, I might miss it. So anyway, let's move on now to the patron questions sent to me by my wonderful patrons and also channel members. And the first one of those is from Sebastian Guerrero, who asks, who do you think is the best captain in Starfleet and why? So, if I'm going to say best captain in Starfleet, that to me sounds like you're asking me to evaluate the character of the captain, the worth of the captain to the service, not necessarily who I think is the best character or who I think is my favorite captain. So, I think I would go with Captain Pike, specifically the version of Captain Pike that we see in Star Trek Discovery, and that we'll be seeing in Strange New Worlds when that starts. I think the Anson Mount version of Captain Pike is I've referred to him before as the platonic ideal of a starship captain. He is everything that Starfleet is supposed to be about, all of the high noble principles of Starfleet, all the things that people are talking about when they say, you're a Starfleet officer, now start acting like it. That's Captain Pike. He lives that. He's like the Captain America of Starfleet, he's like the Steve Rogers of Starfleet. He embodies all of the things that we're supposed to stand for but often don't. And I think Anson Mount captures that wonderfully, and also manages to do it in a way that doesn't make him a flat character. Anson Mount's Pike is a really rich, interesting character with this sort of veil of tragedy over him. But he does it in a way that it does. He doesn't feel brooding. He doesn't feel depressing. He's not a dark character. He's a very noble, heroic character, but he doesn't go too far in that other direction either. and make it, you know, he's not too good to be true. You know what I mean? He's a fantastic character, and within the universe, he's a fantastic captain, and he's referred to over and over throughout his season of Star Trek Discovery as, oh, Chris, you're the best of us. You know, you're the best of Starfleet. And the show actually demonstrates that. The show makes it easy for us to believe that about him. You know, we're told that, and we're also shown that, and that is that's really, really important. So I would say Captain Pike, specifically the Discovery version of Captain Pike. Next question is from Russell or Kirak 2011. Hey, Steve, I trust you had a good holiday weekend. And by the way, feel free to call me Russell. I have subscribed to many channels and have gotten used to it by now. We'll go with Russell then. Man, I really wanted another Star Trek question, but as much as I love Trek, I love NYPD Blue more. I know you commented to me that you were planning on doing a 12 video series at some point, which fair enough. I wait and I am patient. No worries, buddy. But my question is similar to my super chat 2 weeks ago. One of the things I love and adore right off the bat was spoilers. So spoilers for anybody who doesn't want to know about NYPD Blue. Sylvia and Andy's relationship and just how natural it felt from Ipsidis to season 2, their marriage and the struggles along the way, including when Andy falls off the wagon again. And I'm sorry, I could talk all day about this show. I love it. Leading up to Caruso's departure due to the fact he wasn't getting enough screen time. So my actual question is, do you believe it to be genuine or forced? And any further perspective you could offer anyways. Thank you. So I will offer my own spoiler warning here. I'm going to talk. I will be talking spoilers about NYPD Blue for the next minute or so. So if you don't want to know spoilers about NYPD Blue, just, you know, sort of go do something else for a while and then come back in a few minutes and I'll be done talking about it. But I like Andy and Sylvia's relationship. I think the show does. I don't think it's forced. And actually, you mentioned Caruso's departure. It feels like the Andy and Sylvia story would have been more or less the same, even if Caruso had stayed. I'll say that. Like I don't think it would have been too different if you know, if the cast changes hadn't happened, because it just feels like I can see John Kelly taking the role that Bobby Simone took in that, you know, dynamic, and it not having to change a whole lot. So I would imagine that was their plan for Andy and Sylvia from the beginning, and that didn't really change when David Caruso left the show. But yeah, I think their relationship was really interesting. It's one of the high points of the series for me. I like the way they do the, well, Sylvia makes him a better man thing, but they don't do it in a really pandering, condescending, cliched way, and they do it in the way that we do see Sylvia challenging Andy. There's a really, really great episode from after, I think it's either right after their son Andy, not Andy Jr., Theo. It's either right after Theo is born or right before Theo is born. But it's the episode where Andy makes a racist gesture to the other cops. There's like a hand signal that they do that sort of signifies that they're talking about a black person, so they don't have to say they're talking about a black person. And Sylvia notices this and knows what it means because she's a prosecutor and she works around cops and she knows what the deal is. And she calls Andy out on it that night when they're home. You know, she says, I know what that means, and you shouldn't do that. That she tells him, she says, that's basically just the same thing. It's the same thing as saying the N-word. And Andy says, well, but you do that so you don't have to say it. You know, Andy like completely misses the point. Like, and there's like a pause between them. And then Sylvia says to him, don't show that to the baby. Like, don't teach that to our child. And you can tell that it hits Andy, that he feels that, you know, he's chastened by it. And it's a really good scene. And it shows you how their relationship was able to make Andy into a better person and give him occasion to re-examine some of these attitudes that he has had. So I think the long story short, I think the Andy Sylvie relationship in NYPD Blue is fantastic. And thank you. Hey, NYPD Blue questions are always welcome here, my friend. So thank you very much. Lynn Kibblemom says, "Hey, Steve, you've said that in spite of being an atheist, you wished you could believe in a deity or afterlife, but cannot without proof. You also mentioned that you've never seen a UFO. If you could have incontrovertible proof of either a deity, afterlife, or that aliens have visited Earth, which would you choose?" Um, well, I mean, selfishly, I would choose the afterlife thing. You know, it's like that Queen song, "Who Wants to Live Forever." Well, I'm willing to give it a try. Like I might get sick of it at some point, but I'm willing to give it a try. Okay, let's not, let's you know. But yeah, for purely selfish reasons, I would I would rather there be an afterlife than there be aliens. But it is awfully sad if you think whether there's an afterlife or not. If I imagine the universe as being this vast, unfathomably vast, wondrous place, and the only conscious, sentient, sapient beings in all of that vastness that are capable of appreciating it are us. Like that's a really sad thought. Like I mean, some people say like that's a scary thought. Like we're all on our own, we're all by ourselves, and yeah, I get that part of it too. Like we're just sort of swallowed by the vastness, and there's not even anybody else here. Um, but it's just sad that there's nobody else in other corners of the universe that can look up at the sky and see the same things we're seeing and be in awe of it. It's just that's sad. But for selfish reasons, I would say if I could only pick one, I would say I'd rather there be an afterlife. Stephen G. Clenard says, "Steve, what would your ideal Star Trek bridge crew comprising cartoon serial mascots?" For the purposes of this exercise, Snap, Crackle, and Pop would be considered a single officer sitting atop each other's soldiers, and each representing one of the three service divisions: Snap, operations; Crackle, science. What's that you say? This sort of question does not interest you? Very well, have it your way. Steve, which Star Trek character would you most like to see as a cartoon serial mascot? Other than Riker, for Riker nuts, of course. Me, I can't decide between Wesley promoting Wheaton's, oh, that's good, and Joanna Woshikun extolling the virtues of Owozos. Now, those are both pretty good. Actually, Riker nuts is all right. Yeah, Riker nuts is good, but Wheaton's is, oh man, that's great. And yeah, Owozos is good too, but yeah. Um, there's got to be a joke in there somewhere with Neelix, right? I mean, because what's that cereal that they have in the UK? Weetabix, Neelix, Weetabix, Neelabix, maybe. And I mean, Neelix is basically a cereal mascot anyway. I mean, just look at him. Like you wouldn't even need to cartoon him. Like Neelix is basically that's a breakfast cereal mascot just walking around the ship. So you don't need to change that. So yeah, I would say Neelix, and we'll go with something like Neelabix or something. How about that? That's good. I'll go with that. I'm happy with that. I feel like I've done a good night's work. Um, Ancient Y, Peldor Joy, Steve. I've been watching your channel for some time now, and your feelings regarding Voyager and Enterprise are fairly evident at this stage. I love all things Trek, and these two shows are no different. However, I try not to watch them or anything through rose tinted glasses, and will be the first to admit that they have their problems. But on the whole, they've left me laughing, crying, thinking, and above all, entertained. My question is this: do you think Voyager and Enterprise are just bad Star Trek shows, or just bad TV in general? If the former is the case, what TV shows would you consider to be worse than Voyager and Enterprise? Also, apropos of nothing, I want you to know that I love the intro to the Whirlpool. I could watch it on a loop for hours. Gotta go now, Steve, because Agent Meister play Domjot. Bye-bye. I should have done that in more of a Nausicaan voice. Agent Meister play Domjot. Human play Domjot. You got to dial it in. It's hard to get the Nausicaan. Human play Domjot. I'm still not quite there, but it's close. You know, I guess I would say Voyager and Enterprise are bad for Star Trek, but not. I mean, there are so many TV shows that are so much worse than either Voyager or Enterprise. I mean, so much worse. So I mean, You know, what was the name of that fucking what was that sitcom with I can't even think of the name of it, but it was there. I mean, throw a dart at a wall with the titles of like all the sitcoms that have ever aired on the Fox network, and you'll probably come up with one that's pretty bad. I mean, there have been a few good sitcoms on Fox over the years, but you know, like you're probably going to get a pretty if you throw a dart, you're probably going to, and not just Fox. Most sitcoms are terrible. The good ones are definitely the exception to the rule. Um, but yeah, I mean, there have been so many bad shows. There have been so many absolutely terrible shows, and I would not rank either Voyager or Enterprise among the worst TV shows ever by far. No, and as I've said before, there are times when, you know, despite the fact that they are my least favorite corners of the franchise, and particularly Voyager, I've said many times is my least favorite Star Trek show. There are times when I feel like watching Voyager, when that's just what I'm in the mood for. You know, it's usually watchable. I think the term I've used for it in Trek Actually videos is it's perfectly acceptable Star Trek. There are some episodes that are genuinely awful. There are a few episodes that are really, really good that deserve to stand alongside the best of the franchise as a whole. Most of Voyager is just pleasingly mediocre. It's perfectly acceptable Star Trek. There's nothing remotely special about it, but it'll do. You know, and there are times when that's what I'm in the mood for. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would say they're bad for Star Trek, but they're by no means are they among the worst TV shows ever made. That's way too harsh. AMP. So let's say you have a married couple with a child. Say one partner in that couple was a closeted bisexual. Say the hetero parent hadn't realized their partner had been in same-sex relationships before, but after snooping through old phone messages, found out. Suppose the marriage fell apart because of this revelation, and the hetero partner has applied for full custody of the child, just in case the bi parent exposes the child to anything dangerous, violent, or pornographic. Suppose the court agreed, and the bi parent, previously the main caregiver, may now only see the little girl for 1 day a week and under constant supervision. The wonders of the UK legal system, ladies and gentlemen, where discrimination based on race, gender identity, or sexual orientation is supposed to be illegal. My question is, what the absolute fuck is wrong with the world? If I am reading what I think I am between the lines, I am very, very, very sorry to hear this. And yeah, what I mean, you've said it better than I could have. What the fuck is wrong with the world? What is it about a person being bisexual that automatically makes them a greater risk for exposing a child to danger, violence, or pornography? Like those two, that stereotype is so far out of date. It's ridiculous. Because a person is bisexual, therefore they must be you know, what some would consider sexually deviant, or you know, they must be promiscuous, or they must be, you know, watching porn all the time, or into really weird kinky violent shit or whatever. Like there's so much wrong with that mentality, and the idea that it would be a valid reason to change custody of the child, to change who the primary, you know, custodial parent is because of the parent's sexual orientation is appalling. Like that's appalling. There's no excuse for that. So that's outrageous. That's outrageous. And you know, that's my sympathies and solidarity to this hypothetical person, whoever they may be, because that is absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. Social justice alchemy, baba booey, baba booey, baba booey. Hey Steve, long time no ask. How you doing? I'm good. How are you? Pretty good. Pretty good. And of course, as soon as I say that, I swallow a drink and I almost choke to death. You ever do that when you like you swallow a drink and a little bit of it goes down the wrong way, and then you have to take another drink to kind of reset it? You're like you're kind of your throat is kind of spasming, and you're like and then you take another drink, and then you're good. You have to take the reset sip, and then you're good. So that's what I just did. Anyway, Jason Harding, my old friend. As a longtime coulrophobic, by the way, that's fear of clowns. As a longtime coulrophobic, I'm curious, what are your phobias? Do you dislike children or are you pedophobic? Do you really distrust the police or are you copyophobic? Come on, Steve, let us eat your fear. I have a phobia of describing my phobias, so I'm afraid I will be unable to answer this question. Actually, in all seriousness, so far, I mean, hey, fingers crossed, knock on wood. I hope it still counts if it's underneath an acoustic dampening blanket, but knock on wood. I'm wondering if the superstition counts under certain specialized circumstances. I don't think I have any actual phobias. Like there are experiences I would rather not have. There are things I have an aversion to. Like I mean, I suppose if I got up in the middle of the night and the house was dark and I turned on the bathroom light and I saw a big old spider in the sink or some other kind of creepy crawly critter crawling around, like I would be startled. I'd be like, oh shit, my heart would race for a little bit. But I don't think it rises to the level of a phobia. Like I would calm down and I would be able to deal with it, after the initial shock wore off. Like I don't think I would call it a phobia. And I don't really think that's how I react to most things that I have maybe like an instinctive fear of or an instinctive sort of, of like a flight response where I remember there was a time, when I was out for a walk and like at like a national park or something, and I passed a tree and I saw a thing like on the tree, and it took a moment for it to register. But I realized I was looking at a snake, like a snake had climbed up the tree and was like on the side of the tree. And after I realized what it was, I kind of jumped back and was like, whoa, whoa, oh my God, holy shit. Like I was scared of it for a couple of seconds. And then I calmed down and it actually became interesting. Like once the shock wore off, it was okay. And I don't think that's how phobias work. Like a phobia, like I wouldn't be able to look at a snake without feeling distress. It wasn't that at all. It was just the unexpectedness and the shock of it. And once that went away, I was okay. So I'm afraid I have no, in the sense of phobias, like I have no fears for you to eat. I'm sorry. You will have to go hungry, my friend. I apologize. David Colby, dear God, I am sick of those goddamn, which crew would you put where questions, when the far better question is this: would you ditch the Prime Directive in future Star Trek shows? The Prime Directive exists to create situations where the main characters go, should we commit genocide by proxy or not? And the answer is always no, unless it's Dear Doctor. The Prime Directive exists to be broken and thus makes any story involving it boring as shit. Ditch the whole thing, say I. Also, it's super fucked up to have Space America be so smugly non-interventionist when in real life America is the most interventionist power since the British Empire. Oh, also right-winger Chudge and Star Trek are bad. Throw rocks at them. Well, we're on the same page as far as that goes, buddy. Definitely throw rocks at the right-wing Chudge, and not just in the Star Trek community, but everywhere. I know I would keep the Prime Directive. I do like there being a rule that the characters aren't supposed to break, that then they have to break in order for the story to move forward or in order to do the right thing. I think the problem isn't the existence of the Prime Directive. The problem is that it's been broken so many times by so many characters who have faced no consequences for it that it's completely lost it's lost its legitimacy. Like a character breaks the Prime Directive and that nothing ever happens to a character that breaks the Prime Directive. So it's not that big of a deal. It can be treated as a big deal within the story, and there can be some hand wringing and moralizing about like, oh, this is Starfleet General Order number 1. It's there for a reason. We shouldn't be interfering in the natural course of events. But ultimately they do, and everything's fine. So there's not a whole lot of suspense. But I think if you could write the Prime Directive, if you could write a story where a character breaks the Prime Directive in such a way where not only is the decision to break it afforded gravity and a sense of moment, but we actually get to see consequences falling after that. Like, the captain breaks the Prime Directive to do the right thing, but in subsequent episodes, or maybe if make it a movie, and the movie then, like, the Prime Directive violation happens at the start, and then for the rest of the movie, you could even do it in an episode, I suppose. The rest of the story is about the fallout of breaking the Prime Directive. People, higher up in the chain of command, hear about this and have to enact some kind of discipline, and then it becomes an interrogation of the justice system in Starfleet. And is it fair to punish someone, and is it worth the punishment you receive to have broken the Prime Directive? And does this mean that this person will now have a lower ceiling on their career than they ordinarily would have? I mean, there are all kinds of interesting ways you could go with it. So I don't think it's the fault of the Prime Directive that it has become just kind of a boring trope. I think it's the fault of the way that it is utilized in stories. So I wouldn't get rid of it. If I would keep it, and if I wanted to use it, I would hopefully find a more interesting way to use it in a way that hadn't been done before. Orion McMurray, do you think the Tellarites would find the Muppet Show insulting due to pigs in space skits? Thank you for your answer. That should be like a scene in a Star Trek show. I don't know if it could happen now because the Muppets are owned by Disney, and Star Trek is not under the totalitarian dictatorship of Mickey Mouse yet. But I think that would be a really funny moment in a Star Trek show where, like, one of the Federation, one of the human characters is watching like an old episode of the Muppet Show on the computer, and a Tellarite guy is walking by right when Pigs in Space comes on, and you hear his head kind of turns, he hears Pigs in Space. The Tellarite guy turns and looks, and he's like, the fuck? And then there's like a huge crisis, and the Federation almost collapses because of it. I think that would be hilarious. That, what? If they could get away with it as far as like intellectual property and stuff, that would be a great at least a joke, if not a full episode premise for a Lower Decks episode, don't you think? General Contact Unit Problem Child. Remember when you read It Can't Happen Here? Suppose the U.S. really had gone fascist in the 1930s. Fascism isn't stable over long time periods, and controlling a territory as big as the continental U.S. is pretty hard regardless, so the regime probably would have fallen by now. Going by in real life, formerly fascist countries, it's possible or even probable that what would be put in place after that would be a more functional system than the one that fell to fascism in the first place. Like maybe the fascist regime falls in the 1960s and is replaced with a European-style social democracy with proportional representation. I'm going by the example of Spain here. I guess that's my question. Is it possible the world would be better off today if America had got fascism out of its system in the mid-20th century? Well, I mean, there are fascist movements in Europe as we speak. I mean, maybe they're not as prominent or as influential as the fascist movement in the United States, but simply because Europe went through a fascist phase and then came out of it and became much more democratic afterwards. I don't know if that's necessarily enough of a basis to say, we should have done that. We should have gone fascist in the 30s and 40s, and by now we'd have a much better society. And the other thing is, not only that, you're sort of taking it for granted that it would be better, and that it would be better for, a long enough period of time to justify it. But also, there's a lot of sort of, what would you call that? A lot of era privilege. It would be perfectly fine for us if we were living today in the superior social democracy that rose from the ashes of the fallen fascist regime. Wouldn't be so great for all those millions and millions of people who had to live under the fascist regime. So we would be we would be assuming that we would be reaping the benefits of the former fascist regime, not having to live under it. And that's kind of a privilege, and I'm not sure about any of that. I see what you're saying, and I agree with you that it does seem like in the in the aftermath of the fall of their fascist regimes, a lot of European countries became far more um, equitable, far more just, far more democratic, far more kind to their people, and far more peaceful with each other. I mean, that does seem to have been the aftermath. But you could also argue that that was the aftermath of World War II itself, not just fascism, but the horrors of World War II, which, yes, was all tied up in fascism. You can't necessarily separate the two, but it's not as simple as that either. So I would be very reluctant to endorse that, to say like, oh, we should have gotten fascism out of our system and then we'd be better off today. Like there's a lot of stuff to consider there before I say, yeah, absolutely. Uh, some rambling geek who is 37 and not old. Today is my birthday, and I don't know what to ask you. I guess I'll just give a statement of what I do with my ask away questions. I'm doing agitprop, which means I am agitating and propagating. And since I'm agitating, if liberals are upset with me, I think I'm doing my job, even if I upset you, Steve. Because I do see you are tired of some of my bullshit. You may never change your mind about liberalism, but I am using these questions to communicate with your audience. I wish I had some way to answer the dozens of questions you have for me about anarchism, but I only have 1,000 characters here and only 200 characters in the live chat. But I also have to believe that people can change their minds, or else I would be as nihilist as everyone else and say people are shit. Besides, if people are shit, then how can you trust anyone? Anyway, give money to Joanna in Phoenix because capitalism is killing them and they are disabled, so just cook is not helpful advice. Yeah, that's sort of a callback to an argument that was had in the live chat on Wednesday night here. And I agree with that completely. Just cook is not helpful advice. There are lots of other factors to consider. And as I said, and as Dana and I said during that stream, just because something works for you doesn't mean that it will work for everybody else. So, and that's something that we all need to keep in mind, because there are times when I have that mindset where I see people in a certain situation and I'm like, God, why don't they just do this? If I was in that situation, I would do this. And I mean, I totally get where you're coming from there, but you have to take a step back and say, I don't know the whole situation. I've never been in that situation. It's not for me to pass judgment or to say, oh, if only they would do X, Y, Z, they'd be better off. It's not always up to me. And I don't always know. I often don't know. So we're completely on the same page with that. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. And I saw you commented about it. And I think you indicated that you got the joke, which I assumed that you would. I figured that you would get the joke because we've talked about, movies and made references to stuff like that before. But you posted that on Facebook. You said that you were 37, and Dana left you a comment and said, "You're 37," which, come on. Okay. Us old people. I'm not talking about you 37-year-olds. I'm talking about us over 40-year-olds. Okay, just so we're clear. I'm not saying you're old. But us over 40-year-olds, we do enjoy our humorous Kevin Smith references. So it's always nice to see one of those and to see it understood. So next up is a question from Jim Baker. When the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek came out, I was thrilled. The cast was perfect, the script was fun and exciting, and yes, I even loved those lens flares. It was a fantastic movie that I watched and enjoyed over and over again. Then Star Trek Into Darkness came out, and the same thing. Awesome movie. Cumberbatch did an amazing job. Again, I watched it repeatedly, getting new thrills with each viewing. Then came Star Trek Beyond, and I found it to be pretty boring, which is one of the worst things a movie can be. Only watched it once and no real desire to see it again. I've heard you say you really enjoyed it. So my question is, why is Star Trek Beyond actually a great movie? If you have already made a video addressing this one, then I apologize. You have quite the body of work out there these days, buddy. No, I've never made a video about Star Trek Beyond, but you're right. I think Star Trek Beyond is the best of the Kelvin timeline movies, and I have liked all of them. I know, Star Trek Into Darkness gets a lot of criticism, and a lot of people don't like it, and they're annoyed by they attempt the flip flop with Wrath of Khan, where they put Kirk in Spock's place and Spock in Kirk's place, and I agree that doesn't completely work, and it wasn't necessarily the best idea. It's a little too cutesy. It's kind of too clever by half. But overall, I still think Into Darkness is a really good movie, and I enjoyed it when I first saw it, and I've enjoyed it subsequent times when I watched it. But I think Star Trek Beyond is the best of the Kelvin timeline movies, and one of the things I like about it is that it feels like a classic Star Trek story, but it feels that way without being a direct riff or a direct reference to a pre-existing Star Trek story. It has a lot of completely new stuff in it. You know, the villains, the planet that they find themselves on, the starbase Yorktown, which I still absolutely love. It's like this, MC Escher designed uh, gigantic starbase that is just beautiful. It's one of my favorite spaces in Star Trek. One of my favorite locations that they've ever come up with. It's really really well done, and I like it. And I like the performances. I like the characterizations. I like the stuff with Spock and McCoy. I like that they give Scotty a little bit more to do, which isn't necessarily a surprise since Simon Pegg plays Scotty and he also co-wrote the screenplay. And he was like, I'm going to give myself a little something here. Perfectly fine, you know. Uh, I like, and in fact, Scotty has one of my favorite moments in the movie, which kind of sums up probably my favorite thing about it, when he says, we can't just leave them in the clutches of the bad guy. We have to go back there. Our friends are there, and there's a sense in Star Trek Beyond that you don't get nearly as much in the first movie or the second movie, that this crew on the Enterprise has become a family, that they have grown close to each other and they love each other and they value each other, and they are not willing to abandon each other. And by working together, they save the day. They join together to defeat the villain, and I love that. I'm a sucker for that. So yeah. I mean, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it. I'm sorry you didn't think it was boring. I mean, and to each their own. Like, you don't have to like it, but if you're asking what I think is so great about it, it's all of that stuff. It's new, but it feels like a classic Star Trek story, and I really really like that. I really like that a lot. Let me see. Next question is, from Dana, who still doesn't have a clever nickname. But like I said before, uh, Dana doesn't need a clever nickname. Um, Dana says, I like the new format because I can shove as many questions as I want in here as long as it's under 1,000 characters. So, what are your thoughts on the Democrats who are entering the Georgia 14 congressional race against Marjorie Taylor Greene? Who's your favorite and why? Speaking of why do you like things that taste bad, like your bilious sludge? Ugh. I guess it's only fair to let you judge me too. I've been thinking about using they, them pronouns, but I'm kind of conflicted. I don't have any particular attachment to those, but I'm curious what it would be like. Also, I like the idea of making it more common to change your pronouns, but I don't want to perpetuate the idea that non assigned pronouns are faddish. I don't want to be hurtful. What do you think? Also, would you be willing to host a pre show live stream for the live stream of A Little Princess tomorrow night and include the link to the live stream for the show? First of all, I looked up the candidates who are challenging Marjorie Taylor Greene a couple weeks ago, but I forgot to look them up again in preparation for this, so I've completely forgotten who they are. So I can't really tell you anything about them or express any kind of a preference because I don't have that in my brain at the moment. Why do I drink things that taste bad? I mean, again, we get to a point where there's just an honest disagreement, as there was with the last question in Star Trek Beyond. I don't. Bilious sludge. Anybody who is not aware, who is not initiated, when she says bilious sludge, she's talking about the coffee that I drink. I drink black coffee every morning, and Dane is not a fan of black coffee, and so she has named it sludge. And she's very, very judgy, very, very judgy. I don't want to talk about her too much while she's not here to defend herself, but she's super judgy about the black coffee, and I just like it. I've always liked black coffee. I've always preferred black coffee to coffee with cream or sugar. Or like flavored coffee and stuff like that. I like a nice black, rich, dark cup of coffee. And I like flavored seltzer as well, which Dana also gives me shit about. And it's because I think it tastes good. I like it. And also it has like 0 calories and 0 sugar. And it's just like, it's like drinking nothing at all. It's like drinking just, um, I'll, it's like, it's like drinking water that actually tastes like something. So but, as for the they, them pronouns, see, this is part of this is my fault. Dana wanted to talk about this on Wednesday and she forgot and I forgot to remind her. I think it's the kind of thing that would be better discussed with people who have used pronouns other than the ones they were assigned at birth, because I'm really not the one to be advising anybody on this. I mean, I do think that I think that we should normalize being able to experiment with pronouns and being able to use different pronouns if you feel like that would be more comfortable for you. But yeah, I also would share your concern that you don't want to seem like you're treating it like a flippant thing, right? You want it, you don't want people to get the impression that it doesn't matter, that you can just switch pronouns willy-nilly however you feel like. Because to a lot of people, when they go from their assigned pronouns to another set of pronouns, like that's a really, really heavy decision, and that needs to be respected and not just treated as a frivolous thing, but treated as an important thing. So I'm not really sure what to tell you. But I mean, whatever, if you did decide to, start using they, them, obviously I would respect that and I would support that. And I would call you they, them, if that's what you requested to be called, and it would be no problem at all. And hopefully I know it would be no problem for anyone else who knows you and cares about you, or at least has a modicum of respect for people in general, because that's just what you do. You call people by their name, and pronouns are an extension of your name. So, but yeah, but I would ask, and I will, hopefully we can remember to talk about this the next time you're actually on a stream with me, and we can talk, and hopefully there'll be some folks in the chat who have more personal experience with this sort of thing that can offer some better perspectives, because I'm certainly not the guy to do it. And as for, would I be willing to host a pre-show live stream for the live stream of A Little Princess tomorrow night and include a link to the live stream for the show? Absolutely. That is, and in fact, as soon as I get a link to what the live stream for A Little Princess is, to where it is, I will set up that show for tomorrow right then. Like, I will definitely host a pre-show. And YouTube has this great feature where you can actually redirect people to other videos or other streams when your stream ends. So what I will do is I will set up my pre-show live stream, and we'll do that for half an hour or so. And then when it's curtain time, I will end my live stream and I'll have it set to redirect everybody watching my live stream to the Little Princess live stream, which I believe you said, I think it's going to be free. Like, you don't need to buy a ticket for it. Everybody will be able to see it. So I'll set it as a redirect, so everybody who's watching me can go straight over to the Little Princess show, and we can all watch it together, those of us who are interested. So I'm definitely going to do that. And as soon as you find out what that is and where that is, I will set that up, and we'll do that. We'll definitely do that tomorrow night. So stay tuned, everybody. Tomorrow night, probably around, curtain goes up at 7:30 Eastern time. So probably around 7 o'clock Eastern time, I'll do a live stream on this channel as a pre-show for the live stream of Dana's play, A Little Princess, and then we'll all watch it together. Wouldn't that be cool? I would really like that. Anyway, toilet blaze. So there have been 5 churches burned. No idea what's causing it, but it has been very dry and hot up here in Western Canada. I think 5 is too many for none of them to be intentionally set, but I'm buoyed that no one has died in these incidents. Also, I'm reminded of the Irish bombing of Lord Mountbatten. He was killed, but so were children. Sad. This also reminded me of that horrible Oklahoma City bombing. And they were so sure they were doing the right thing. They had no idea there was a daycare center on the first floor. The most interesting part, from my point of view, was the cable news organizations were wondering who did it, while the Iran news agency blamed it on a U.S. Christian group, which is funny considering that, well, they were more accurate than all of U.S. cable news media put together. Anyway, I suppose I have to ask you a question now that I'm getting closer to the end. Have you any interest in watching The Crown? I've heard it's very good. There's a nice attention to detail. Not particularly. I've read things about it that make it sound like a good show, but I've never watched it. I've never felt any particular pull to watching it. Um, but if people tell me it's a good show, I'll take their word for it. But no, I've never. I mean, I don't mean to disparage it. Lots of people say it's a good show. I'm sure it is a good show. I'm sure there are very talented people who do it, but um, no, it's never really seemed that compelling to me. So no, and yeah, I hadn't heard about the churches being burned in Canada. I guess I missed that, but I'm really sorry to hear that. And hopefully, if it is the work of people setting them on fire, hopefully those people are found and brought to justice as soon as possible before they burn another church, and certainly before they actually kill somebody. Um, Relic 5000, greetings, O guru of Star Trek wisdom and left-leaning sarcasm. Last week I asked my big burning question, and I still haven't come up with another one. So here are 5 random questions, and I'll take these as they come. What is your favorite song from Disney's Moana? I have never watched Moana, so I have no favorite song. Dana did show me a YouTube clip of one of the songs from it. I think it's called You're Welcome. It's the one where the Rock's character sings it. So I guess I'll pick that by default, but I have to tell you in all honesty, sitting here right now, I remember nothing about the song. I don't remember how it sounds. I don't remember any of the lyrics, but it's the only song from Moana I have ever heard. So by default, I would say that is my favorite. I remember not thinking it was bad at the time. So, number 2, when you have a steak, how do you like it? Medium rare or medium. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But I usually don't eat steak because I'm a vegetarian, but I do cheat occasionally and have a steak. It's been months, I think, since the last time I actually had a steak. But yeah, I usually order it either medium rare or medium. Number 3, do you speak any languages other than English? No, I am a monoglot. 4, how many states have you been to? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 10. I think 10. In the roughly 10. In the neighborhood of 10. Number 5, why is the sky blue? Because of the oxygen in the atmosphere. That reminds me of one of my favorite Robin Williams stand-up routines from a Robin Williams Live at the Met, where he's going through like a discussion with his son, who was like a little boy at the time, and his son was asking him questions, and he says, "Why is the sky blue?" And Robin Williams says, "Well, it's blue because of the atmosphere." "Why is there atmosphere?" Well, because we need to breathe." "Why do we need to breathe?" "Why the fuck do you want to know?" A week ago, you were sitting in your own shit. Now you're Carl Sagan. So, the oxygen in the atmosphere. Siamak, who is once again late and doesn't actually have a question. So instead, I will just share this with you and the group, and we will all enjoy your reading of the last line in particular. That feeling of absurd existential helplessness when the CAPTCHA is wrong, not you. And you try to answer it honestly, but that's not a fucking bus. It's a camper. I know what I'm talking about. There are 4 lights. Hope I didn't blow out the mic too much with that. Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, I know you say your favorite Star Trek ship is Nova class, but mine is the Galaxy class. I love the cruise ship-like design in which it looks like a lavish office building. I guess this makes sense when you're on long-distance trips and need space on your ship to make it more comfortable. I like the blue and red nacelle configuration and the overall design of the ship. I also love the LCARs and computer access terminals. Sometimes at my boring job, until after I graduate from school, I pretend I'm the Enterprise D. Yes, the actual ship, wandering the galaxy and collecting data and carrying out first contact missions. What do you think, Steve? I would definitely want to live on the D. My 2 other Federation favorites are the Ambassador class and the Miranda class. Oh, I think there's no question. The Enterprise D is definitely the ship I would want to live on. Of all of the primary settings of Star Trek shows, I mean, the Enterprise D is it. Like, I don't think it's the most dramatically compelling. It's not my favorite aesthetically. I think I've said a lot, many times before, like aesthetically, I think my favorite Enterprise is the movie version of the classic Enterprise, the refit Constitution class. And particularly in Star Trek Six, like I love the bridge on Star Trek Six. I love the interior of Star Trek Six on the Enterprise on Star Trek Six, and also the Enterprise in Star Trek Discovery, uh, outside and inside. I love that version of the ship. It's just beautiful, and I love the Defiant. Like there's lots of ships that I appreciate more aesthetically and dramatically than the Enterprise D. But if we're talking about where would I want to live if I had to live in a primary location of a Star Trek show, it's definitely the Enterprise D. No question about it. Because it does seem so comfortable and so big and so luxurious. Yeah, the Enterprise D is definitely where I would want to live. Absolutely. No question at all. And finally, from Joe McClory, who says, that cursor out of there, goddammit. In 1911, we had 435 members of the House and a population of 93,863,000, making it one member per 215,777 people. In 2020, the population was 331,449,281, or one member per 761,952. Should we expand the House to 1536 to get the representation we had in 1911, or maybe just 581 so that the number is set at the lowest population of a state, or one per 580,000 residents? That's a really good. Now that last one is a really interesting suggestion. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. I see the wisdom in limiting the number of representatives because I mean, there's a sense in which the House is rather unwieldy at the moment with 435 members. And if we almost quadruple that, I could see it being, even more chaotic. But at the same time, representation does matter. And maybe your suggestion of not increasing it all the way to 1,500 something, but increasing it to 580 something, so that the number of people represented is the same as the population of the least populated state. Like that seems kind of interesting. That's an interesting suggestion to me. I might could support that, maybe. I think that's an interesting suggestion, and I'm not completely closed. I'm not completely closed off to the idea of increasing the number of members. I think it's a matter of how much. But I'm not against that at all. But yeah, I like that idea. It's an interesting idea of increasing the number of members so that the population, the number of people represented per member is equal to the population of the lowest populated state. That's a really interesting suggestion. So, yeah. But anyway, that is the last of the patron and member questions. So I'm going to turn now, at long last, to... hang on a second. Okay. Dana has still not sent me any information about the live stream, by the way. But I'm sure it's not her fault. So anyway, to the live chat now. To the live chat. Let me see if it'll actually... There it is. There. Now it's big enough to be somewhat readable. There we go. Anyway, hi everybody, and let's see what people are asking in the live chat. Draw to Trekkie says, question for a dude too lazy to do his research. What did Dean Cain say now concerning Captain America? Well, he didn't really say anything about Captain America specifically. He was interviewed on Fox and Friends the other day. And actually, I just saw it on Twitter this morning. I don't watch Fox and Friends, so I missed it the first time. But apparently, it was a couple of days ago when he was on, and it just now sort of found its way to Twitter. But they asked Dean Cain, because of course Dean Cain is, he played Superman, and now he is a right-wing dipshit, And so they asked him about the new quote unquote woke Captain America, because there's a new Captain America comic coming out called The United States of Captain America. And in the comic, Captain America has become disillusioned with America yet again. And he has a speech where he talks about how, the American dream, for a lot of people, the American dream doesn't really exist anymore. The American dream is a lie. And for some other people, they conceive the American dream in ways that set America apart from the rest of the world and make it more difficult to be welcoming to immigrants and to minorities. And I think there's a line where he says that, America should not be trying to keep people out. America should be finding ways to bring everybody in. And that's the promise of America. And so, of course, a lot of right wingers think this is terrible. And they brought Dean Cain on, who had not read any of the comics in question and apparently has not read any Captain America comics ever, just like all the other people complaining about this, because this is nothing. They've told the same Captain America story over and over and over again for the last 50 years. This is not remotely new. This is just the most recent version of it. But Dean Cain basically said, well, I like America. That's virtually all he said. They said, what do you think about woke Captain America? And Dean Cain was like, well, lots of people hate America now, but I love America. That's basically all he said. So he just spouted some boilerplate right-wing dipshittery. I got a super chat from Nick Jeffrey. Thank you very much, my friend. Says, hi, Steve. Have you read Terry Pratchett or watched any TV adaptations of his books? I just watched the BBC America series, The Watch, and enjoyed it. I have never read anything by Terry Pratchett, and I've never, to my knowledge, I've never watched any of the adaptations. So I have missed out, I'm afraid. Let's see some of these other questions. John Brockman tagged me just to say penis. Thank you, John. CMX says, I need to say my question was actually lifted from a friend. How can I trust anything you say to me from now on? Let's just go on. Let's just get on with the show. Oh, John Brockman. I appreciate this added detail. The churches are being burned in response to the ongoing discovery of more genocide of natives. So the residential school thing. So is it churches affiliated with the residential schools that have the mass graves that are being burned? I still don't. I mean, I don't know if burning the churches is necessarily the solution to that. But I mean, especially if nobody is being hurt, right? Like if nobody's being killed and people are burning down the churches that are affiliated with, having mass graves of native children. I can't say I'm that upset about that. If that is the case, that's kind of understandable. All they did was burn down the church. You probably got off light if all that happened to you was that your church got burned down. I mean, if you have an unmarked mass grave of indigenous children on your property, and the worst thing that happens to your organization is that somebody burns down your church as a result of that, you probably got off easy. I mean, I can't necessarily condone it, but I can't say I'm super upset about it. Oh, okay. I just got a message from Dana, by the way, about the live stream. She says there will be a public link on the website main page tomorrow. So I won't have it for anybody tonight, but as soon as it's up tomorrow, I will set up the live stream for tomorrow night at 7. So anybody who wants to watch Dana's play being live streamed tomorrow night, I will have it all. It'll all be set up by tomorrow night. So we'll have that squared away. So. Let me see. Daryl Lett says, okay, Steve, down in Washington County, Maryland, does it ever get up in the high 90s or over 100 degrees Fahrenheit? And if it does, how do you handle it if you have to go outside? It has been in the 90s pretty regularly for the last several weeks. And my solution has been to go outside as little as possible. during the spring and the summer, I prefer to go out and take walks. And I like to take a nice long walk and work up a sweat and get my heart rate up. Like that's the way I get exercise, is to go out and take a walk for, you know, an hour or so, and you know, get my steps in, as we old people say. And I have not done that for the last several weeks because it's been too goddamn hot. And unless I want to get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, which I don't, to go for a walk before it gets too hot, it's just not, it just ain't happening. So, you know, I've been getting my exercise on my, I have an exercise bike, and I've been getting my money's worth out of that for the last several weeks. And it's been fine. And I'd much rather, you know, ride the bike for an hour or so in the air conditioning than go outside and go for a walk in 90+ degree weather and come back sweaty and dehydrated and miserable. But yeah, I mean, my solution is to go out as little as possible. I'm lucky because I work from home. I really, the only reason I have to leave the house is to go get groceries. And I do that once a week. So, you know, or like I go out to mow the lawn maybe. And after I mow the lawn, I do try to mow the lawn relatively early in the day before it gets too hot. But other than that, like you try to avoid it, you know. But yes, it definitely gets that hot here, and it has been. Um, Dorota Trekkie says, since I talked about it in my fanfic now, was tapestry in Picard's head, or did Q really interfere? Oh, I think Q really interfered. I think that was real. 255 AD says, do you remember the Enterprise episode where he loses a communicator in a pre-warp planet? I think that episode does a good job of showing why the Prime Directive is sometimes needed. Yeah, and you know, as I think I said in my video, I don't know if I remember that episode or not. My memory on Enterprise is fuzzy because there are a lot of Enterprise episodes that I only saw once, and it was back in the day when it was originally on. Like I haven't sat down and done a complete rewatch of Enterprise since, you know, I don't think I ever have. So I think I saw that episode, but I don't remember a lot about it. Um, but yeah, I do think that there, as I said in my video about the Prime Directive, there are reasons to have the Prime Directive, especially if it is, you know, a non-interference directive, and the idea is to discourage a more advanced power from meddling in the affairs of a more primitive power. I mean, I think that's a very important lesson, especially for Americans to hear in the 1960s when we were involved in a war that we were involved in because we felt entitled to go over to someone else's country and tell them how they should organize their government. I mean, I don't think the non-interference thing is necessarily, it's not automatically a bad idea, but when you take it to the point of we'll let people die from causes we could prevent, then I think you're taking it too far. But there are certainly times when I think the Prime Directive would be and is, you know, in our own lives when it is appropriate. Um, do, 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 do. Radical Bacon says, "Can I put you in my D&D campaign as someone who does not want to be there?" Yes, absolutely. You can put me in your D&D campaign. You can base characters on me. I have no problem with that at all. I have no problem with that at all. I mean, you can do whatever you want as long as I'm not there and I don't have to I don't have to participate. And putting me in there as someone who doesn't want to be there is that's the best use of me, I think, in a D&D game. Um, John Brockman says, just for groceries? What about the bowling team? I mean, I would imagine that due to COVID, there was no bowling team for the last year and a half anyway. 255 AD says, you live in a borderline southern state. Is it safe for you to be honest about your political views with the people you know offline? Yeah. I've never hid my political views, at least not as an adult. I've never hid my political views. But again, keep in mind, uh, I work for myself. I don't have kids, so, and my kids, so I don't have, you know, other parents to deal with. I don't have schools to deal with. I don't have an employer to deal with. Um, And for the most part, I don't give a shit whether people like me or not. And there are very few people in my life that I need to have like me in order to have a good quality of life. So I'm in a fairly privileged situation as far as that goes. So I know yeah, I mean, this is a very, very conservative area. Like, this is a very right wing area that I live in. People who are even left of center, let alone further to the left, are very much in the minority around here. But I have never felt like I had to be quiet about my political beliefs to people that I know personally. I mean, it might piss some people off, but most people who disagree with me to that extent that they would be angered by my beliefs, I don't spend time with anyway. So, Joe McClory, I miss the live stream sometimes. Is there a good reason it didn't have the chat recap in the video? It's supposed to. I've noticed too. There have been times when I go back and check it, and the live chat replay is not there. And it's supposed to be. I have it turned on for all my live streams, and some of them it is. I go back and look, and there is a live chat replay. But for some of them, occasionally it's not. I don't know if it depends on how soon you watch it after the stream ends. If it needs time to process or something. I don't know what the deal is, but I don't know. I have the live chat replay turned on for all my streams, and hopefully it's there. Throughout the track, he says, "Why am I still talking to people who say, hey, the Snyder Cut is superior to the Whedon Cut? Am I bitching because people like something?" I don't personally think it's an argument worth having. Like, to me, if someone if someone is still willing to try and plant a flag and say, "Oh, the Snyder Cut is better than the theatrical cut," okay, enjoy that then. Like, I mean, I don't feel invested in that argument at all. If you're not being an asshole about it, then you know what? Good for you. Like what you like. If you are being an asshole about it, then fuck you. Either way, I don't really feel like talking to you about it. So I don't know. Why are you still talking? Why? That's a good question. Why are you still talking to people who want to argue that the Snyder Cut is better? That's a great question. Radical Bacon, have you watched Philosophy Tube's new video? The answer is no. You're right. The answer is no. I haven't watched it yet. But it's a good answer to Emmer Lyon's question. What YouTubers do you follow other than yourself? Philosophy Tube is one of them. I try to watch her videos. Obviously not as soon as they come out, but I try to catch them within a week or so after they come out. So I still watch her stuff. I still make an effort to watch ContraPoints. I watched H Bomber Guy's new one about the anti-vax movement and Andrew Wakefield. I thought that was really good. I watch I can't think of his name now. Ryan George on Screen Rants, who does the pitch meetings. I like those. I like Botchamania as a wrestling fan, and I follow some other wrestling related YouTube channels. I mean, but I think I've said before, and there are people who are friends of mine who I try to keep up with their stuff, like Christy Winters. I try to watch her stuff, and Jesse Gender. I watch her stuff when I get the chance. But I really don't follow that many YouTubers, and most of the YouTubers I pay attention to are people that I know to one degree or another. Like, most of the really, really big channels, like, I have no interest in at all. I probably don't even know who they are. John Johnson asks, do you think a Star Trek series could ever involve the Q or other ascended species as a diplomatic force, the way B5 did, i.e. the Federation versus them allied with them or fighting an enemy allied with them? Potentially, but I don't know if there was there a race in Babylon 5 that were ever portrayed as being nearly as powerful as the Q? I mean, I know the old ones were sort of shown as being really, really, like, more powerful than the other races, the younger races. But I mean, the Q are omnipotent. Like, the Q can snap their fingers and anything can happen. I don't remember any beings on Babylon 5 that were nearly that powerful. So I don't know how you would use the Q in that way without changing them or diminishing them in some way. But I mean, it's an intriguing idea. And as always, I would say I want to see this. I would want to see the story. I would want, like, the concept could potentially be something, but I would need to read or watch the story. I mean, do I think it could ever involve that? Sure, it could if there's a story. Absolutely. And Geralta Trekkie, question: did you see that Andromeda's persona, Kira backhanding Jadzia? Oof, that's putting a damper on their friendship now, does it? Was it Kira who smacked her, or was it O'Brien? I think O'Brien backhanded her. And yeah, I mean, it's not they weren't in control of themselves. So I mean, I'm sure that Jadzia would say, "Hey, don't worry about it." But yeah, I mean, it might put a damper on someone's friendship, getting smacked right in the face. Um, Some random geek says, "In your state, would it be safe for me to express my political views?" Also, I don't have kids. Um, I mean, it would be safe, and I don't think you would be like attacked for it. I don't think anybody would come and try to kick your ass. You would probably meet a lot of resistance, but at the same time, you might also find people who agree with you. I mean, I'm sure that there are people in this area who are a lot further to the left politically than I am. Uh, that you could find and befriend and ally with. But I mean, yeah, there are lots of people that would dismiss you or be angry about you for being an anarchist, or they would call you a commie or something. But I mean, it would be safe in the sense I don't think you'd have to fear for your life. But a lot of people probably would hold it against you, unfortunately. Um, Sarah asks, "What's the deal with the police in the U.S. anyway? Why are they all still armed? Why are they all armed?" That is a great question. I don't think they should be armed. I don't think police on regular patrol, or certainly not police like who are doing traffic stops and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think they should be armed. I don't think they should be walking around with a gun on their hip. That's ridiculous to me. That is not the entire problem, and taking that away would not fix the problem, but it's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. So that's a great question. They shouldn't. They shouldn't be. 285 AD, have you ever wanted to live in a more progressive area? Yeah, I have. I totally have. Um, Dorota Trekkie says, "Do you know Felix Sevenrock? I'm sure you're saying no, but I say yes because the Germans decided to rename Gary Seven Felix Sevenrock to honor a guy named Siebenrock. Seven, interesting. So Gary Seven, in I guess in the German translation of Star Trek, Gary Seven is Felix Seven. That's really interesting. I had no idea. So I guess I do. I guess I do know. Super chat from Kirak 2011. Thank you very much. So curious because I need a Trek question. LOL. Do you believe Trelane was a Q? I think it's possible to write him that way, but I don't think he was necessarily. And actually, the last time I got this question a few weeks ago, I think Jason was in the chat, and he reminded me that actually in the episode, The Squire of Gothos, Trelane's powers are linked to a machine that he has at his castle. And once they disable the machine, Trelane loses his powers. So, depending on what the true relationship was between Trelane and that machine, you could say that he definitely wasn't a Q, because the Q don't seem to get their powers from any kind of machine. It's just innate abilities that they have. So, if you interpret what happens in the Squire of Gothos as being, on the face on if you take it at face value, is what I'm trying to say, then I think you can argue pretty convincingly that he's not a Q. But you could always figure out a way around that. Like if you wanted to write him as a Q, you could figure out a way around that. And I think there have been novels and comics and stuff that have written Trelane as a Q, and they've explained the machine and his more limited powers in various ways. So I mean, he could be. I personally think it's more interesting if he's not, because I don't think everything has to be the same thing. Like just because there are two omnipotent beings in the Star Trek universe, I don't think they both have to be Q. It's just like, I think a long time ago, somebody asked me about, I can't think of her name now. Is it Katya? Iman's character in Star Trek Six, the shapeshifter, and they said, "Do you think she's a changeling?" And I said, "No, I don't think she is. She doesn't behave like a changeling. She does. Her powers don't seem similar to changelings, and just because she's a shapeshifter and Odo is a shapeshifter, that doesn't mean they have to be the same thing. They could be different, you know." Joe McClure, this is a good one. What jobs should cops not have? Boy. Um, I mean, I don't think they should be called to mental health emergencies. I don't think they should be called to domestic disputes where there isn't like I don't think they should be called to any kind of situation where there isn't like um where it doesn't call for like an armed or militant response. Like if someone is in crisis or if people are having a disagreement and it hasn't gone violent, I don't think there's a need to call. I think we should have other agencies that are suited to respond to those situations. You know, um, there are lots of jobs that we have given to cops that cops shouldn't have. Do, do, do. 255 AD asks, do you need to disarm the general population before you disarm the police? I would prefer to do them concurrently. I think we desperately need to do both. It would be easier to disarm the police because there are fewer police. And, you know, I mean, the police are under, at least theoretically, are under other people's authority. And you could just say, hey, no more guns for you. That's it. Um, And I mean, when I say disarm the police would still, I do believe that the police departments should still have access to firearms so that they can have guns if a situation calls for them, but they should not be carrying them around just as a matter of standard procedure. So I think, I mean, we can disarm the police first, and I don't think it would hurt them because if they get called to a situation where they have to respond to a person who is armed, then you can send specially trained armed cops to deal with that situation. Um, but I think we need to do both. We desperately need to disarm both the police and the population. Um, and Duralta Trekkie, I about asking about the movie and the TV series V. I watched the TV show V when it was on, but it was a long time ago, and I was a little kid, so I don't remember a whole lot of it. I just remember the basic premise of it. But it might be interesting to go back and watch that again as a grown up because I haven't watched it for a long time. I watched it when it was on, but I have very little recall of it. Um, 2 to 5 AD says, didn't you once say your dad reacted badly when you said you had communist friends like Geek? He didn't react. I mean, he didn't get like mad about it or anything, but I think he was kind of like communist, you know, like that. Like, you know, what? My dad has a very old fashioned, very sort of baby boomer esque attitude toward communists. He sort of lumps them all together as just bad, they're the bad people, you know, and attaches a lot of other things to them, like they're anti-American, they're anti-democratic, et cetera, et cetera. Things that certainly do not apply to all communists or even to most communists that I've known. Um, but yeah, he just has a very instinctive, very generally negative outlook on communists because that is how communists have been portrayed in popular media and popular culture in this country for 70 years, and he's a product of that and has not really questioned it, and that's just the way it is. But he wasn't you know his reaction to it wasn't that bad, but it was an instinctively negative reaction for sure, for sure. um and I remember once a long time ago, I remember talking to him. We were talking about music, and I mentioned John Lennon, and he said, John Lennon, he's a communist. So, he has a very negative opinion of communists. Not a very deep opinion, but a very negative opinion. Super chat from Ace Internet Fighter Pilot. What happens to all, and by the way, thank you very much. What happens to all the dishes the replicators make whenever someone wants food in Star Trek? Picard must have thousands of teacups. Maybe that's what was in the blue barrel that broke Worf's back. I love that. I love that. There's some kind of glitch in the way that in the way that replicators work, where when it makes a plate, it can't just unmake it when you put it back in. So they have to stack those up somewhere. They've forgotten how to do dishes because they're all dependent on the replicators. So whenever they have dirty dishes, they just warehouse them. And that's what's in all those cargo containers in the cargo bays. I love that. I think the real answer is that you put them back in the replicator and they dissolve, like they just sort of dematerialize. I think we've seen that a time or two in Star Trek shows. Um, Not very often, but often enough to establish that that's what they do. But I love that idea of that's there's just barrels and barrels stacked up of used dishware because they don't know what else to do with them. That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, Martia, thank you, Gerald Trekkie. Martia, yes, Martia. She's the shapeshifter in Star Trek 6. And no, I have not watched Space Patrol. Um, Oh, George Trekkie, do I think Sylvia and Korob are proto-Q, although they have their thingamajig that allows them to show their power? And that's from, I forget the title of the episode, but it's the Star Trek Halloween episode. But I forget the title of it now. But yeah, the one with like the black cat. No, I don't think it's necessary to say that they're proto-Q. Again, I mean, we can I don't not everything has to be the same thing. I think that actually kind of makes the universe a little smaller. If you say like, oh, they have omnipotent powers, they must be a Q, or they have quasi omnipotent powers, they must be some kind of a Q, you know? Um, Geek says, I'm an anti American, cop hating, communist anarchist. Is it still safe for me to express my views in the South? Depends on how you express them. If you express them, if you are too sort of, I guess, if you are too vehement about being anti American and cop hating, then there are probably some people around here who might take a swing at you if you're too mouthy about it. But then again, I don't know. I mean, and honestly, the anti-American thing is probably going to get you in more trouble than the communist anarchist thing, because most people don't even know what an anarchist is, and they know what a communist is, but they know it like my dad knows it. They just see it as just a generically bad thing. But if you start saying that you're anti-American and that you hate cops, there's a lot of really, again, there's just a lot of really ignorant, small-minded people around here that have a reflexive defense mechanism that kicks in when you start talking shit about cops and about the United States. Like if you, I got into an argument with my dad once a long, long time ago about how I think the song Proud to Be an American sucks ass. But that's about this country. Yeah, but it's a shitty song. Like it's just a shitty song. I mean, no matter what you think about the country, you could be the most rah-rah flag waving patriotic guy in the world. And that's still a goddamn shitty song. So, but yeah, the anti-American stuff would probably get you in more trouble than, you know. 255 AD, if I asked my father to explain what communism is and why it's bad, do you think he could? I think he could from his perspective. I think he could articulate why he feels the way he feels, but I do think a lot of it would probably be based on assumptions and stereotypes and misinformation. But yeah, I think he could articulate it if I asked him to, but I don't know if his opinion would would jibe with mine. Cat's Paw. Thank you, Norman. Cat's Paw is the title of the yeah. And I see there's an argument in the chat between a couple of people and Sarah because I guess Sarah, your dad was a cop. Let me just say, I don't think that being a cop automatically makes any given individual a bad person. I kind of, Dana and I have very similar views on this. And she actually, it's one of the reasons why she has said that she's uncomfortable I mean, she still says it, like she still says a cab, like if we're talking and it happens to be 1:12 in the afternoon and she notices, she'll say a cab, like she says that, but she's also expressed discomfort with that phrase because she's not sure if it's fair to say all cops are bastards. It's she. I think she said she would rather say all cops are complicit, because the problem isn't that all individual cops are bad people. The problem is that the system that they work in is corrupt and flawed and abusive. And that's what really needs to be fixed. And there are tons of bad cops in that system that help to perpetuate that system and make it even worse. But ultimately, it's the way we do policing that is the problem. And some people who are even more extreme on this than I am would say policing itself is the problem and that it can't be done properly. I don't agree with that, but there are people who say that. But either way, it's the system that is really the problem, not every single individual who does it. So I personally, and I'm not jumping on anybody on the other side either. But me personally, I don't think that it's fair to say that every person who is a cop or was ever a cop is automatically a bad person and never did any good for anybody. I just don't think that's true. I think it's fair to say that they were complicit in an abusive, bad system, and that system needs to be changed or reformed or done away with and built back up from the ground up, or just gotten rid of completely, whatever you happen to believe. But I don't think that means that no cop has ever done anything good, or that every cop should be condemned and ashamed. And I think that's too simplistic. I don't agree with that. I'm totally on board with police reform, with like really, really fundamental, serious, extensive police reform. But I'm not on board with every single cop is a piece of shit. And, I'm not, I can't go that far, but I appreciate I appreciate where that comes from. Because, policing is fucked up. Like policing is fucked up. There's no getting around that. Um, Oh, 285 AD. My dad, yes, you're right. My dad was in the Navy. And does he get indignant when people talk about the American empire in a negative way? That's interesting. It depends on what you're talking about. My dad is the kind of guy who believes that we should not be imposing ourselves in the affairs of other countries. So, I mean, in that sense, like if you criticize the American empire, uh, in the context of saying, like, we shouldn't be over there, or we shouldn't be, we should bring our troops home from those countries, we shouldn't be, we shouldn't be the world's police department, we shouldn't be trying to fix everything, and like, he's anti-interventionist. But there are probably certain arguments you could make, and probably certain ideas you could express that would be anti-empire, um, that he would have a problem with. Like if and I don't, I've never talked about this with my dad, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I would speculate that, for instance, if you said, well, like, we should give up we shouldn't have annexed Hawaii, because that was imperialist, and we shouldn't have, we should grant independence to Puerto Rico and to Guam and to other territories that we have that are not full US states, but that are under American control. Like, if you made that argument, so we should grant those independence and let those people, decide for themselves. I think he might oppose that because he would view that as diminishing the United States. He would view Guam, for example, and I'm sure a military guy would look at it this way, because Guam is, and Hawaii as well. Like they in the past and even today, they've had a lot of utility as military bases. And I think he would view them in terms of their utility. And if you said, we shouldn't have territories, like we should either make Guam a state, or let it be independent. And he might look at that as losing something, as the United States diminishing itself, and he would oppose it on that basis. But it's And I think a lot of guys my dad's age from his generation that I have known have had very similar views where he he skews conservative most of the time and is very pro military and very um very patriotic in a traditional sort of typical way and not in a very critical way, and doesn't usually take well to very deep kind of harsh criticisms of the United States as a society. um but at the same time, you know, he is also like, I remember I had a discussion with him back a long time ago about Ronald Reagan, who is like the you know, the saint of the Republican Party, and Dad said he didn't like Reagan because Reagan was not for the working man. So there's that sort of there's a weird kind of proletarianism mixed in with his, you know, pro military, pro America thing. And it's I think I know a lot of people his age who are like that, who if they vote, they probably end up voting Republican more often than not, or they just don't vote. Or they vote like for a libertarian or some kind of, you know, fringe candidate that doesn't have a chance. But in terms of economic policy, they're a lot more progressive than you might expect. Whether they realize it or not, I don't think my dad would characterize himself like that, and I don't think he thinks of himself that way. But you know, when it comes to, you know, the plight of working people, he's very much on their side, not on the side of the bosses and corporations and the rich. Um, they're all Trekkie. And while we're on the happy topic, since Hogan's Heroes never got a proper ending, how would you think the series would have ended? Clink and Schultz in prison? Clink and Schultz being hanged. It's not that dark. It's not a dark enough comedy for that. But I mean, they were Nazis. I don't have any problem with Nazis being hanged. Um, SETI Bear unions. I think Dad is more or less pro union. Eh. I don't think he's entirely. I don't know if he was ever. He's never been a member of a union, to my knowledge. But he's not entirely anti-union. But he probably I think he has more misgivings about unions than I do, and he's not as pro-union as I am. But he's not like He's not like anti-union completely either. Um, Kirak 20. My dad is a smart man. I mean, I disagree with him about a lot, like especially the military stuff and the sort of reflexively pro-America stuff. But yeah, yeah, he is a smart man, and we do agree on a lot of stuff. Um, 255 AD says, "How do you feel about saying members of the armed forces are morally culpable for taking part in unjust wars, at least as much as cops are?" I think it's fair to assign a degree of culpability to them. But I think it's also important to recognize that an individual soldier doesn't have very much control over what happens and that they are not directing the war. And yes, it's easy to say, like, well, if the soldiers refused to fight, there wouldn't be a war. I mean, that's true, but you know, I don't think it's that simple. Um, I mean, so I think it's fair to assign, and the same with cops. I think it's fair to assign a degree of culpability, and to ask for them to reflect on that and to be open to considering that maybe they, you know, if they have the opportunity to do something else, maybe they should do something else. You know, I think that's completely fair. Director Trekkie, when are you getting your COVID shots, or did you already get them? I got mine back in April, and I just got the one shot. I got the Johnson and Johnson, so I got it back in April. So I am all vaxxed. I'm ready to go. Um, yes, and John Brockman, that is a good point. The military draws heavily from the impoverished. Yes, so I mean, a lot of people who join the military, a lot of people who enlist in the military, um, do so because it is the best economic option open to them. And if they do that and then get sent off to fight in a war that is being fought for dubious reasons, I don't think it's necessarily fair to completely blame them for that. I think it's fair to point out that they are taking part in an unjust action and to assign a certain amount of responsibility to them, but to not treat them as though it's completely their fault or that they're automatically bad people for doing it. Um, and yeah, Radical Bacon says much the same thing. When I was in, nearly everyone was in to get away from poverty. Yeah, and blame capitalism, blame predatory recruitment tactics. Yeah. They're out to Trekkie says, I'm turning 38 in a couple of weeks. I'm not old. Sorry, I need to yell at the kids on my lawn. Get those damn kids off my lawn. You're 3 years younger than me, buddy. So if you're old, then I'm even older. So, you know. Um, Neil Blumgarten. This is a great question. Neil Blumengarten asks, "Sure, you'd want to live on the Enterprise D, but would you feel the same if it meant your mother was going to live there too?" The nice thing about the Enterprise D is that it's a huge ship and has tons of empty space, so I could avoid the shit out of my mom. So I would rather not. I'm very much in the same boat as Ensign Johnson is at this point in our show, where the prospect of my mother living on the ship would be something I would want to avoid if at all possible. But it's a big ship and there's lots of opportunities for avoidance. So it wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, but I would prefer not to have my mother living on the ship with me. Um, Geralta Trekkie, what's my favorite Disney song from all of the Disney? Honestly, I don't really have one. Like, there's nothing there. I can't think of one that like jumps out at me. Um, when You Wish Upon a Star is nice. Like, I guess I would go with that one. And I do like Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a really really good movie. I watched that for late seating and was very impressed with it. 255 AD. Did my dad vote for either of the Bushes? I'm not sure actually. I would, if I had to guess, I would say he may have voted for George H.W. I don't know if he would have voted for George W. He might have voted for George W. the first time, and maybe he voted for him the second time too. I'm not sure, but I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. But I don't know specifically. I don't think we talked about it. I wouldn't rule it out. Um, Joe McClory asks, "Would you work harder to avoid your mom or Deanna's? What's the difference?" I would have to work harder to avoid my mom if she was living on the ship, because thankfully Loaxana does not live on the ship. So I wouldn't have to work as hard to avoid her. But while she was on the ship, yeah, I would work. Objectively speaking, I think Steve's mom, Steve Johnson's mom on the show, is not as bad as Loaxana. I think one of the big problems with Loaxana is that she is so domineering and is and whenever she interacts with Deanna, she is trying to control her. And we've never really gone that direction with Ensign Johnson's mom. She's never been controlling. She's very overbearing and disregarding of her son's wishes and of her son's boundaries, which is bad. It's very bad, and is not something that anybody should do, especially if you're the parent of an adult child. You should not be pushing through their boundaries. You should be respecting their boundaries. But she's not as domineering as Loaxana is. So I think Loaxana would be worse than my mom on the show. Kurak 2011 with a super chat. Thank you very much. Says, so I watched a video of yours on why Voyager was your least favorite. And one of those reasons was because there was no consequences for the episodic. Oh, and I get to wait for the follow-up for part 2. Um, And part two from Kirak, who says the episodic nature of the series. So it got me wondering, since TOS is very similar, how does TOS rank for you as the series goes? Well, here's the thing. All of the Star Trek shows, up to and even including most of Deep Space Nine, are and Voyager as well, and Enterprise really. Again, for the most part, are extremely episodic, and they do fall into that pattern of really really important shit happens this week, and by next week it really doesn't matter, right? Uh, Far less of a problem on Deep Space Nine once it gets going. They're much much better at maintaining a kind of continuity and having actions have consequences that stick after that episode. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Star Trek: The Original Series is probably has the most self-contained episodes of any of the shows. But I think Star Trek: The Original Series is one of the best shows in the franchise. I would rank it fairly high because I think it has other things going for it that make the highly episodic nature of it not a problem. The reason why the episodic nature of Voyager was a problem, or was a problem for me in particular, is because Voyager would do this thing where, um, first of all, the premise of Voyager would seem to suggest that it could be more serialized, you know, because there is a naturally sort of overarching story. There's a natural progression for the show. They're lost and they want to get home, so there's a place naturally for this show to go in the long term. There really wasn't any such story in the original Star Trek. They just had a vague mission. They're just supposed to explore different planets and encounter different civilizations. They're not really going anywhere or doing anything specific. Voyager, they have a goal in mind. So you would think that the show could be and maybe should have been more serialized, and or at least have more continuity between, even if it wasn't serialized, just have more continuity between episodes, have more impact of the events that happen in one episode that are still felt in future episodes. And there was very, very little of that. Um, so I think it harmed the premise of the series, and I think it cut against the premise and weakened the premise of the series. And the general overall blandness of Voyager exacerbated it too. It's not just that the show was very episodic. It's that the show was really, really dull. And a lot of these characters were just really shallow and poorly drawn and fuzzy. And then every once in a while, there'd be an episode where something potentially earth shaking would happen, something that could shake things up or change the lives of these characters. And by the next week, it's like it never even happened. So it's the combination of all those factors and the blandness of the show, and the fact that the show week to week was just so fucking boring and so pointless. It made it even worse when some big thing would happen and then it was forgotten about by the very next episode. So I think it's a lot of, but to answer your actual question, I think TOS ranks very high for me because it has other things. The characterizations in TOS, even though it's similar with TNG, even though the characters are mostly very static, the characterizations are very strong. You get a real good sense of who Captain Kirk is, of who Spock is, of who McCoy is, especially. And to a lesser degree, you get an impression of who Scotty is and who Uhura is and who Sulu and Chekhov are. And most of that for the supporting cast is due to the acting, not necessarily to the writing, because those characters weren't written very well, or at least not written very strongly. But the actors did a good job of imparting character to those people in a way that felt like it was, you know, that it left an impression and felt like you at least knew something about who they were. You know, and also the original Star Trek just has a wonderful made up as it goes along goofiness to it that I adore. So, but I would rank original Star Trek very high in the franchise. Um, yeah, Geraldo Trekkie, you're right. Janeway drinks black coffee, and so do I. On 255 AD, I wanted to answer your question from earlier. If I'm not even sure he voted for Bush, why were you worried he would vote for Trump? I wasn't necessarily worried that he had voted for him. It was just a great relief to find out that he hadn't. I'll put it that way. There's nothing about my dad that made me think, oh shit, he probably voted for Trump. But still, there's always that possibility And, Trump did have a kind of, and it was completely phony, and I don't think anybody should have bought it for a second, but there was a part of Trump's message that was superficially pro working class. It wasn't, and he wasn't, and nobody should have fallen for it, but a lot of people did. So, uh, it's within the realm of possibility that people like my dad were persuaded by his fake populism and voted for him for that reason. But yes, it was. I was very, very. I wasn't necessarily worried about it as a possibility, but I was very relieved to learn that he didn't. Um, Kira, yeah, I love TOS. Actually, my next Trek Actually video next week is TOS centered because it's about the different parallel Earths and duplicate Earths that are encountered, and almost all of those are in TOS. There aren't really a whole lot of, depending on how broadly define it, you can say that there are parallel Earths encountered by the later shows, but most of the really, especially like the theme planets, like the gangster planet or the Roman Empire planet or the Nazi planet, like that's classic Star Trek, and I love that shit. And I hold TOS in very high esteem. Um, Out to Trekkie, I'm not really a model builder. Would I be interested in building the Enterprise D as is now possible via Build the Enterprise by Eagle Moss? Not really. I'm not really a builder. Um, John Brockman says, my brother dislikes DS9 for bringing mystical woo-woo into Trek. What say you? I say Deep Space Nine didn't bring mystical woo-woo into Trek. That was always in Star Trek. There's mystical woo-woo in Star Trek, the original series. Where do people get the idea that Star Trek was like this Arthur C. Clarke hard sci-fi at any point? Because it never was. I mean, Star Trek 3, okay, is about Kirk trying to return Spock's soul to his home planet. Is that not mystical woo-woo? Deep Space Nine did not bring that in. It was always part of the franchise. So I have, and even if Deep Space Nine had brought it in, I wouldn't have given a shit because it's a fantasy show. And again, it's not hard sci-fi. And if they wanted to have actually, you know what? Deep Space Nine provides a more scientific explanation for its mystical woo-woo than most of the other Star Trek that has it does. Because they're wormhole aliens. It's not that they're actually gods that live in the celestial temple. That's a wormhole, and there are some really powerful aliens that live there, and that's the explanation. It's not that they're gods. So there is even the mystical woo-woo in Deep Space Nine has a scientific explanation. It's just that the Bajorans view them as prophets, as gods. So no, I have no problem with that at all. Like if you have a problem with magic and mystical stuff and fantasy elements and things that are not like hard sci-fi, you probably shouldn't be watching Star Trek because it's never been that show ever. Like the same thing when people got mad at Discovery because of the spore drive and time crystals. And I'm just like, what show have you been watching all these years? Like the spore drive is no more ridiculous than Subspace. It's equally made up. It's just made up. Is it any dumber to time travel with a time crystal than to say you can travel back in time by flying around the sun fast enough? Are you kidding me? Or by transporting through a layer of chronoton particles, which is how they time travel in past tense, one of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine ever? Or because they have some kind of element with weird properties in the cargo bay, and that's how the Ferengi travel back in time to the 1940s in Little Green Men? It's just made up. How is any of that less silly than a time crystal? But people lost their minds about time crystals in Discovery, going like, oh, it's just silly now. They're just making up silly shit. It's always been silly shit. What have you been watching? So no, I don't have a problem with Deep Space Nine bringing in mystical woo-woo because that Deep Space Nine didn't introduce that. That's always been a part of the franchise. Yeah, see, Spock's brain. Yes, and SETI brain. Yes, Spock was all about mystical. Vulcans are religious people. I think a lot of fans forget because Vulcans are so logical and they tend to veer toward the scientific, and they tend to the Vulcan characters tend to be very skeptical of things. But Vulcans are also, they have religion, they have gods, they have a spiritual side, they have arcs for their souls that they keep their souls in. The existence of Vulcan souls is canon in Star Trek. So yeah, yeah. And yes, thank you, Kirak 20. Don't forget about the Magic Time Donut. One of the most celebrated episodes of the entire franchise is about people traveling back in time by walking through a magic talking time donut. But Deep Space Nine sucks because it has religious people in it. Like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah, 255D, another great example. And that's a good episode. The episode of Deep Space Nine where everybody has good luck because the quarks are spinning the wrong direction. Like they offer a scientific explanation for it, but it's goofy as hell. It's goofy as hell. And it's a good episode. Like who cares? Who cares what the explanation is for the thing, for the fake made up thing in the sci-fi show? If it's a good story, if you care about what happens, if you're invested in the characters, if you want to see what happens next, that's all I care about. I don't give a fuck about how plausible the spore drive is or how plausible it is for to have some kind of physical phenomenon that changes everybody's luck or to have a magic talking time donut that can take you back to the 1930s. Like none of that is plausible. It's ridiculous. It's a show. It's Star Trek. Come on. Jeff Carlin asks, do I listen to any heavy metal? Not really. If you want to know my musical taste, generally speaking, I like it's mostly pretty mainstream stuff. Like I listen to stuff, I still listen to stuff that was like being played on the radio when I was a little kid. I like some sort of alternative bands. I love one of my favorite bands ever is Modest Mouse. I love Modest Mouse. I still have a huge soft spot for the Verve Pipe because they were like a huge band when I was in high school. At least they had one. They weren't really a huge band, but they had like one really huge hit, and then I became a fan of theirs and bought all the rest of their albums. I like Ben Folds 5. I like blues. I like classic R&B. I really like Sam Cooke. Um, I like some of the like classic old like blues and R&B singers like Sarah Vaughan and um, there is a Piedmont blues duo that from the Washington D.C. area that I used to really love called Cephas and Wiggins. John Cephas and Phil Wiggins, and unfortunately John Cephas died several years ago, but I think Phil Wiggins is still performing on his own. But I like a lot of stuff. I like old like 1960s and 70s country like Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, and I like some stuff from the 80s like Steve Earle and um, some early like 70s and 80s Randy Travis. So I mean, I don't really like the I hate like the pop mainstream like radio country that's been the main thing for like the last 30 years. Like you know, uh, but I like some independent country. Like I like I love Hank Williams. I'm decently fond of Hank Williams Jr., though he's not really my favorite. I like what I've heard of Hank the Third. Um, I really like Bobby Folks, who is a really great sort of indie country star who's been doing stuff for like the last 20 years or so. Um, yeah, fairly broad. You know, not too adventurous, but I don't really dig a whole lot of heavy metal. I've never really been super into that. Um, Joe, I will confess, I do have a soft spot for Stained. I don't mind Linkin Park, like I'll listen to it, but I mean, I do have a soft spot for Stained. I did get into Stained a little bit when I was in my 20s. Um, And Liam Foley asks, am I a Beatles fan? Yeah, I do. I like the Beatles. I like the Beatles. I wouldn't say I'm like a particular fan of the Beatles, but I really like the Beatles. I like the Monkees too. Actually, I think I probably like the Monkees more than I like the Beatles, or at least the music of the Monkees means more to me personally than the music of the Beatles, because I've listened to it more, and I used to be a fan of the show, and I don't know, I like the kitschiness and the goofiness of it. I like the Rolling Stones. Um, and derogatory. I've listened to a couple of Rammstein songs, but I've never been super into them. Um, Paul Wilson with a super chat says, what is it that you don't like about high fantasy? If you don't mind magic and woo as mechanisms within the universe, I personally like both. I mean, it's fine that if you like it, it's fine. I have an instinctive sort of just bored reaction when you start talking to me about wizards and elves and knights and shit. It's just like, oh God. I think a lot of it is the kind of elevated or faux elevated tone that is adopted by a lot of high fantasy. I just, I hear people talking like that. I hear people, uh, I see people dressed in chainmail or flowing robes, and I'm put off by the aesthetics of it. I'm put off by the tone of it, by the sound of it, by the voice of a lot of it. It's just not my thing. It's not just because you're right. I mean, there is magic and mystical stuff in other things that I like. Um, and despite the fact that the creator of it turned out to be a huge piece of shit, I was and am a fan of the Harry Potter movies. I never read the books, but I enjoyed all the movies, and that's all about magic and stuff, and I enjoyed those quite a bit. But they felt more accessible. They didn't feel as up their own ass as, like, say, the Lord of the Rings does. They didn't seem as convinced of their own profundity as the Lord of the Rings does, or as a lot of high fantasy seems, um, to me. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the trappings of a lot of high fantasy that just seems like I don't care about dragons. I don't care about stories set in some mystical long ago quasi medieval setting. I don't care about elves and orcs and wizards. I don't give a shit. You know. You want to make me you want to make me care about an elf? Put him in a blue shirt and put him on a starship, and don't call him an elf. Call him a Vulcan, and I'm okay with that. Um, Super chat from Kirak 2011. No question here, just a comment, but the NYPD Blue question was inspired by the fact that I've recently started a rewatch and wow, still love it. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think I've mentioned it before. I rewatched NYPD Blue from start to finish a couple years ago, and yeah, I mean, I noticed things about it that with my more modern sensitive eyes I found problematic and kind of winced out a little bit. But overall, I think it holds up tremendously well. I still think it's a great show, like a great show. And all the stuff that I really loved about it at the time when it was originally airing, I still responded to just as strongly. I mean, I loved Bobby Simone. I loved the character arc of Sipowicz. Um, I loved the attempt at um, at addressing issues with policing. I mean, I don't think the show went far enough, and I think it still had a mostly kind of pro-police attitude, but it at least made an attempt to criticize policing and to acknowledge the problems with racism in policing and with corruption in policing and things like that. Which for a show of its time, I think was extraordinary. And I enjoyed the fact that when I watched, you know who one of my favorite characters was when I watched it back through the second time, or just a couple years ago, Sergeant Martens from Internal Affairs, because the cops in NYPD Blue, almost all of them, and just like real life cops in Internal Affairs are viewed as like lower than low. They're cops that investigate cops. They're turncoats, right? Cops they hate the Internal Affairs Bureau. But Sergeant Martens, who was the main member of Internal Affairs that we see throughout the show, and he was just a recurring character. He was never a regular, but he popped up frequently throughout the entire run of the series. And he was always a hero. I mean, even when Sipowicz didn't like him, when the main characters didn't like him because he was Internal Affairs, he was always straight. He never investigated anybody who didn't deserve to be investigated. He never screwed anybody. He never turned out to be a villain for any reason. He was a straight up good cop who was doing a very necessary job. And yes, he investigated other cops, but because that was necessary, because there were so many dirty, shitty cops on the force, and you need someone like Martens and like the Internal Affairs Bureau to at least try to push some of that back and ameliorate that problem. And I really appreciated that watching it the second time through, that Martens was always viewed as, I mean, he wasn't always the nicest guy, and he wasn't always depicted in a completely positive light, but he was always shown to be a good cop and a heroic character who was genuinely trying to do the right thing. And I really thought that was great. And he wound up being one of my favorite characters in the show. And I always was happy to see him pop up in an episode. Um, John Brockman. Oh, you like him because he's straight? Wow. Exactly. I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kirok 20. Yeah, Sipowicz and Fancy is great too. That's a great relationship between those two characters. That's a great relationship. Um, Summer in a Geek. I should watch The Wire too. I've never watched The Wire. I should watch The Wire too. Um, Gerald Trekkie asks, so now that Firefly is done, what was your favorite character and what do you think nearly a year after you started watching it? It's hard to pick a favorite character because none of them really left that strong of an impression on me. And the show itself didn't really leave that much of an impression on me. I guess if I had to pick my favorite character, is probably Mal, because he got most of the best lines. Although Zoe and Wash get some good lines in there here and there too. But it's overall what I think of the show is I just kind of think, yeah, it was okay. You know, it was okay. Like I don't regret watching it. I don't think it was like a bad show. I'm not like, oh Jesus, I wish I could have those weeks back. Nothing like that. But I know that, like, if we were not watching it for the show, I wouldn't have kept watching it. I just didn't think it was that interesting. I I like the idea. I like the aesthetic. I like the space western stuff. I thought all of that stuff worked really good. But it reminded me a lot of. I remember Roger Ebert's original review of the 1989 Batman movie, where he, like a lot of people, praised the production design and the set design and the look. And Roger Ebert said, I really love Tim Burton's version of Gotham City. It's one of the most interesting looking places that I've ever seen in a movie. I just wished that something more interesting had happened there. And that's kind of how I end up feeling about Firefly. I like the look, I like the premise, I like the space western concept. Um, I just wasn't all that interested in most of what happened. And even the episodes I liked, I've mostly forgotten at this point. Like, I know there were a couple of episodes that I did think were pretty good, and I couldn't tell you, very much about them now. It's gone completely out of my head. I thought it was fine. Like, I thought it was fine. So, that's my opinion of it. And if I were not watching it as a part of a series that I had committed to, I probably would have stopped watching it because I just would have lost interest in it. It just didn't move me. And I didn't think the movie was that great. Again, I wasn't, I remember there, and I won't spoil it for anybody, but there are important characters who are killed off, and I didn't care about any of them. I wasn't like, oh my God, they didn't kill so-and-so. Like, I didn't care. I didn't care because I wasn't invested in any of them. Kirok 2011 with a super chat says, Sergeant Martens and Simone, conversation about keeping people out of situations is classic. Yes. Great scene. And also a super chat from Paul Wilson. Thank you very much. Says, if you dislike elves just for being elves, not Vulcans, doesn't it make sense that some dislike crystals just for being crystals? Yeah, I guess. Crystals are crystals. Crystals aren't time machines. That makes sense. And by the way, some random geek, a couple of other people asked, "Do I like westerns?" I, generally speaking, I really do. I really like westerns. I like westerns as a genre for sure. Um, I really love, some of my favorite movies are westerns. I love The Searchers. I love Unforgiven. My Darling Clementine. It's, oh, such a great movie. Um, I used to watch Gunsmoke a lot when I was working at my last real job, when I was a maintenance worker at a truck stop. So we're talking like 20 years ago. Um, I would get up early in the morning for for my shift, and they would be showing episodes of Gunsmoke on TV Land, and I would watch Gunsmoke while I was getting ready, and I got hooked on Gunsmoke. I like westerns a lot. I'm I mean, I don't love every Western I've seen some shitty Westerns, but generally as a genre, I like Westerns. And yeah, Dr. Trek, yeah, Star Trek does have a lot in common with Westerns. Yeah. Um, Kirak 2011, I would say both of those are enjoyable to watch. He says Young Guns or Tombstone. Um, Tombstone more than Young Guns. I think they're both like fun to watch. I don't think either one of them is what I would call a good movie. Um, But I mean, Tombstone definitely has some good performances in it. Like, I think Val Kilmer is really great in Tombstone, but I also think it's like really corny. Um, but I'll watch it. I mean, I have a great time watching it. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if I would call it like a good movie, but it's a hell of a lot of a fun movie. Yeah, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Liam Foley. That's a great one. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart. And his more in his later era of his career, when he's taking on more interesting roles and he's not always just playing like the upstanding good guy. Yeah. Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is a great one. 2-5 AD says duplicates of Earth appear on Doctor Who as well. Why was this a thing in 60s sci-fi? It reminds me of cavemen with dinosaurs, terrible science that used to be in everything. I think one of the main reasons why, especially in the 60s, was because it was cheap. That was why they did it so often on Star Trek. And I think Gene Roddenberry even wrote that into his pitch to the network. He said, if you're worried about a show like this being too expensive to film on a weekly basis, many of the planets that our crew visits will be very Earth-like because of this idea of parallel development that we were going to introduce into the show relatively early on, which they did. The main reason why it was used so often in the 60s, and especially on the original Star Trek, and presumably on the original Doctor Who as well, because it had similar budgetary concerns, is because it was just cheaper. You could shoot on pre-existing sets. You could shoot episodes on the back lot. You could use pre-existing costumes. It's just a lot cheaper to set things on Earth. That's why the Masters of the Universe movie from 1987 takes place mostly on Earth, not on Eternia, because it was made by Canon, which did not have a huge budget, and it's just cheaper to set it on Earth. That's the main reason. Duranta Trekkie says, another fun thing about the German dubbing. Did you know that the Pon farr situation was turned into a space fever in the German dub? I didn't. So did they just not have, was the sex thing not a part of it at all? That's interesting. Well, it is past 8 o'clock, so I'm going to begin wrapping this up, everybody. So thanks so much for joining me. I want to remind everybody about the charity links that are down below in the description of the video. Those links are collected by our pal, Some Random Geek, and those are fundraisers and legal defense funds and PayPal links and such to help out some friends of ours who are in financial distress. If you can possibly help any of our friends out with a few bucks here and there, that would be fantastic. Also, if you want to help me out, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button down there below the video on the YouTube page. Either one of those helps me out tremendously, however much you can afford to pledge each month. If you become a member or a Patreon patron at any level, you are able to post questions ahead of time for these Ask Away streams. And I always answer patron and member questions first thing. And if you pledge $5 a month or more, either as a patron or a member, you also get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. So if you like what I do here on YouTube and you can afford to help me continue to do it, please consider doing so by becoming a patron or clicking the join button and becoming a member. Also, don't forget, if you enjoy the YouTube videos, you may also enjoy the podcasts that I'm a part of. They are in the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. I co-host Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast, along with Jason Harding, and I also am in the cast of the Ensign's Log, a Star Trek-themed comedy podcast that I am on, along with Jason Harding, and also the brilliant and talented Dana Cole, who is performing in a play right now. And the new episode of the Ensign's Log just went up today. You can listen to that. You can also listen to the most recent episode of Late Seating, which is our review of Chinatown that went up last week. And you can listen to those at letmelistenpodcasts.com or through the links that are also available in the video description. So that is it, everybody. Don't forget, if you are interested in watching Dana's play, there will be a live stream of it tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. And I will be doing a live pre-show for it on this channel. I'll do probably just a half an hour or so before curtain goes up, so a half an hour or so before 7:30, so 7 o'clock, let's say, maybe a little bit before, but I'll do a little pre-show where we can hang out in the chat and just kind of talk and get ready, and then I will automatically redirect the stream to the live stream for the play, and we can all be redirected there and watch it together. It'll be a lot of fun for those of you who are interested in watching Dana's play. She is Miss Minchin in A Little Princess, for those of you who don't know. And tomorrow is their last performance, and it will be live streamed for everybody to see. So that'll be fun. Hopefully I'll see some of you there for that, and I'll see you next week for a whole bunch of videos. I'll see you back on Wednesday. Dana and I are doing the next Trek Reluctantly, and we will be watching the first half of Magic Mike, which I've never seen. So that'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully it'll be fun for all of you as well. That's it. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. I'll see you tomorrow night for the live stream before Dana's play, and then I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye.